Here we go. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another narrator interview here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. I'm your host, Gabriel Garcia, otherwise known as the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill. And joining us today is a very special guest. Now, she is an amazing narrator. She has so many projects she wants to announce here on this episode. And more recently, if you saw the recent short that I posted a few days ago, or if you're just seeing this now, she is the official voice of Cynbel for my upcoming cast of The Gathering, the narration audio book. So without further ado, let's give a huge round of applause to my good friend, Amber, alias Cynbel from The Gathering. Amber, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Gabriel. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome, Amber. And I'm so excited to have you here because, viewers and listeners, Amber has a very special announcement she would like to share. So if you are fans of D&D and more, we're going to be talking about something very soon. Before we get to that, Amber, would you like to share with our viewers and listeners what you've been up to as of late?
Oh man, so much. I just finished narrating the project The Paradox of Survival, which is a dark fantasy with a sapphic romance subplot by Annalyn Hammer. That one has a necromantic princess, which is super cool, who uses a violin to do her powers. I'm submitting that to ACX today. We just hit #1 bestseller for my audiobook for A Song for Rust City by Samina Lungu. So that actually hit 4 different bestseller categories this morning. So that was pretty cool. And then I will be starting on the White Wolf project next.
Nice. Very, very nice. And as I also mentioned earlier, viewers and listeners, Amber's also working on another special project, which I'm going to turn over to her to make the official announcement. Amber, would you like to share with our viewers and listeners the project that you are excited to begin working on soon?
The one that we are fundraising, or the one that we are starting soon. That one is going to be, if you've ever played Werewolf the Apocalypse or Vampire the Masquerade or Changeling the Lost, White Wolf had a whole bunch of novels that were written back in the 90s. So this is like 26 years later. I am actually very honored to be starting narrating the clan novel La Sombra from the Vampire the Masquerade novels. I'm actually getting to start narrating almost exactly 26 years after its original publication. We get to follow a bunch of urban vampires from all of the different clans that are available in the Vampire the Masquerade kind of role-playing splat. So you've got Gangrels, you've got the Tzimisce, you've got the Bruja, you've got everybody kind of fighting. You got all these different perspectives. The big conflict is between the assassin La Sombra Lucita and Tally, who is sent to make sure that she doesn't get to kill who she wants to kill. And so you get to see them do this really fascinating dance between them, between the different princes of the city, as everyone's trying to not get killed, but also take over more parts of the city in this continuing story of the war between the Sabbat and the Camarilla. And so I am beyond excited to be able to bring that to life as a person who has been a LARPer in the Mind's Eye Society, or Modern Enigma Society now, which specifically LARPs in the World of Darkness splats. So this is something I have lived in for like the last 10 years. And now I get to bring all of my excitement for those stories to one of the best written stories of the original parts of those games. So I'm really excited about that.
Awesome. So we have a lot to cover, viewers and listeners, in this interview. But before we get to these amazing projects that Amber has been part of and will be a part of in the future, let's talk a little bit more about my friend Amber. Now, if you saw her first interview on my other show, Into the Maze, then you already have a good idea. But if you're watching this interview now, Amber, what would you like to share with our viewers and listeners of how you got into this industry as a narrator, as a voiceover artist? How did that all come about?
Right. So I had been in ministry for about 6 years before this. I was a nanny before that. I was an English major before that. And when I started having kids, we started realizing that, I was going to have to start stepping back from ministry, especially after the birth of my twins. So I gave birth to a pair of twin baby girls in 2022. And after that, we had a long, long period of convalescence. We had my son home. So I was a stay-at-home mom for a while. And so last year we were kind of getting to the space where my son was starting to go to school. My daughters were stable. My health was starting to become stable. We were going, well, I would like to get back into something, but what would I even get into? Because I couldn't go back into the career I had. And so what was I even qualified for? What was I good at? And my husband, to whom I read to every single night, went, wow, you're really good at the voices. And I kind of like squirreled that away. And then my mom sent me a TikTok about auditioning on ACX. And
Ooh.
it was one of those things where it's like, make $3,000 in 5 days, which everybody knows that's not how that works. If you're listening, you're watching this, that is not how this works.
No.
But it did make me start thinking, and I go, okay, that does sound fun. I really love reading stories. I really love performing, but could I really do it? And so I started to think about like, okay, what are my actual qualifications? And I sat down and had a really long think about what are my qualifications. I've done theater since I was 9 years old. I actually was in theater with Melissa Benoist, who was Supergirl. She is just as nice in person as she seems she is. So really big theater kid my entire life. I trained as a lector in my local parish. I was a cantor in my local parish. I'm an English major, so my analysis of literature is a huge thing that I do, and I think it does actually help me in my narration. I did public speaking and ministry for 6 years. As a nanny, I was always reading to children, and so I thought I was going to do mostly children's books. First off. But when I realized, like, oh, I actually do have a lot of the skill set, the performance skill set, the background that would be required for this, I started talking to my husband, who's in the film industry. I said, how hard would the technical part of it be? Because
Mm.
that scared the bejesus out of me. So he actually had me sit down with his audio guy, and his audio guy talked me through like what beginner microphone should I get, what software should I use. In the beginning when we didn't know if I was gonna really like it or not. And so we sat down, we got all the stuff together, and I just kind of decided to go for it because that's kind of my personality. When I want to do something, I make a decision and I go. And so I did my first 4 interviews, because I did used to write a lot. So I understood the process
Mm.
of, submit to 200 places, get maybe one, maybe.
Right.
Um, so that was what I was prepared for. And I was just trying to kind of get my feelers out. And within my first 4 auditions, I actually bagged my first offer for West of the Apocalypse, which is a sci-fi western. I auditioned because I thought that was such a crazy, fun-looking genre to begin with. Um, and I went, "Oh crap, I really gotta figure this out." So I took maybe 2 weeks to do the hardest crash course in making audiobooks that I have ever done in my life. And since then, I think I was a third of the way through that book when I, realized I really love this. And in talking to my author, Bill Bloom, who also is an
Mhm.
author at AudioMazes, great guy, fantastically encouraging human being. In conversations with him and like what that process was like for him and how that fed me and made me more excited to perform, I kind of went, oh wow, I love this. And if the first part was diving with my feet in, I decided to submerge fully at that point. And, the rest has kind of been history. I've accepted 14 offers in this first year of being a narrator. 3 of them have been from presses. That's been super exciting. I've done children's books. I've done sci-fi western, sci-fi mystery, sci-fi romantasy. You can tell what my favorite genre is. I've done a horror. I've done a memoir. That memoir kicked my butt.
Ooh.
Oh, that one. Whoa, I don't know what will ever top that one emotionally for the rest of my life, but I'm open. Um, I'm doing a dark romance at the end of the year. The Lasombro novel is going to be paranormal urban. Next year we're looking at doing, the magical girl fantasy, and then another gothic next year as well. So getting a nice mix, but you can kind of also tell where my voice fits.
Yes, absolutely. And also, viewers and listeners, on the other show, there was a little off camera on Into the Maze where Amber actually has the perfect radio voice, like the 1940s. It's so beautiful. So if any authors out there are listening and you're writing a World War II story, like a 1930s, 1920s story, and you're looking for that reporter voice or that voice from the 1940s, Amber is your go-to because she has an amazing range. Now, as I said, viewers and listeners, in the beginning, Amber is the voice of Cynbel for the upcoming project of The Gathering Witch. Honestly, hearing her voice as Cynbel really just blew me away and everything. And that kind of leads into a very interesting question, which I want to ask you, Amber. So, whenever you work on a new project, you're given characters, you're given the idea of the story and everything. Do you have a routine that you always embark whenever you take on a new project, whether it's, do you read the story all the way through to get an idea of like, okay, this is the tone of the story? Or when it comes to characters, do you do any research for dialects, tone, speech patterns? How much research do you really go into for these characters? Ultimately, what is your routine for every new project you're a part of?
A lot of that depends on how closely I'm working with the author. There's still going to be a lot of research, but there's going to be like two branches that I take it. So
Okay.
I do read the story all the way through. I got surprised with some deaths in the first one, and I'm never making that mistake again. You don't, as a narrator, you do not want to be surprised by a character death. It can make the emotions really raw and real, and that's great, but also can like completely take you out of the feel for the rest of the day. So it is important. And there's also the horror stories of finding out on page 312 that a character has a Scottish brogue and you didn't know it because they didn't mention it.
Oh,
So,
yes.
later because it wasn't relevant. That actually happens in the Lasombra novel several times, because when you switch the point of view, like from the character's perspective, they don't care that they have an accent. They don't talk about their ethnicity. But from another character's perspective, 10 chapters down, that character cares. And
Yes.
then you get this whole picture. So first I'll read the story entirely all the way through, and I will make notes on any, if it's I'm just doing one character, I'll make a bunch of notes on my character. If it's everybody, I will make a running character sheet, and I will make lists of like, what is their name? How is their name pronounced? And sometimes this becomes a list of questions for my author or for the publisher of like, if I don't think I know how this is pronounced, I'm asking.
Right.
And I'll also put down a lot of character quirks of, okay, this character is really impulsive, or this character thinks a lot before they talk. This character has speech patterns that are kind of very like Valley Girl or younger, or someone who like reads a lot because they're using a lot of big words. So that is something that I'm good at, pattern recognition. And so I will write down what the pattern is. And then when I figure out what the different patterns are for the different characters, then I start thinking about, okay, what is this character? If I have a really tight relationship with my author, I will ask them questions of, did you have a character in mind? Did you have an author or an actress that you were
Right.
hearing in your head, that I'm probably not going to mimic perfectly, but if I hear what they're doing, can I see what you were kind of doing? Um, and half and half, my authors have said like, oh, I have this really clear vision for this character, but this other character, I really didn't.
Right.
But most authors don't realize how clear they've made that character's voice with how they write them. I have rarely found a book, and I usually do not finish those books, like when I'm reading them for personal,
Right.
found a character where the characters don't talk uniquely. And one uses a lot of short words, one uses a lot of long words, one uses a lot of like short punctuation, one uses a lot of commas, they pause a lot while they talk. And so with looking at all of the different lines of dialogue, I go, okay, what kind of person talks like that? What kind of person talks like that and makes these decisions? For me, it's helpful for me to think about the people that I know personally who act like that. And
Right.
so I will base their voices like, I surprised Bill with a character's voice, that he was like, "Oh crap, like I had never thought of the character's voice that way, but when I hear it, it's perfect."
Mm-hmm.
And I go, "Great," because I based it on my aunt. Because my aunt, who is a, chain smoker, like talks like this, makes these kinds of decisions. So it's easy for me to keep in my brain because I like have little placeholder people of like, it's this person, it's this person. And so that's easier, especially when you have the last project that just went live, Virtuoso had over 40 unique voices.
Right.
Really hard to keep track of unless I go, that character is my friend that I go dancing with every week. I've heard their voice every single day of my life. I know what that person sounds like, and so I, like, assign them the person that I'm thinking of in my head, to keep them together in my head, and sometimes it'll be like that person, but with a scratchier voice. Lots of variations, but once I get all of that down, I also then choose a narrator voice.
Mm,
You've been talking about range. Um, every book has a different narrator voice.
right.
Is it noir? Is it
Mhm.
slower? Is it more methodical? Are you building things up? Is it romance? Is it more hopeful? Or is it a darker romance where it's a lot more sultry and you're talking to people? It's still my voice, but you're going to have a very different
Right.
focus. So I have to go, what is the tone of this novel? And am I going with my perfectly natural voice, which is very sarcastic? Or am I going more hopeful? Am I going higher pitched? Something like that. So I also have to choose which narrator voice am I using and how am I gonna stick with that?
Absolutely. And this actually leads to a very fun question, which I really want to ask you, Amber. And I imagine, just like for all of us creative people, authors, editors, narrators alike, whenever we work on something, we put a lot of heart into it. And sometimes we
Mhm.
take a step back to, let it marry. But when we go back to our work, there's going to be moments where, like, oh, shoot, where was that idea off? Or where was that voice off? So for you as a
Mhm.
narrator, whether you are the uh, I can never say that word. The third person narrator who's not
Omniscient.
one of, yes, thank you. I can
Third
never say
person
that word.
omniscient.
That the non-character speaker who's telling the story or one of the characters in the books, what's sort of like a cue for you to help you remember that was the voice that you were going with for either of those two parts?
I usually don't leave myself a lot of space for that reason, so that I don't lose
Mm,
it. I do my things straight through. If I'm doing 2 projects at a time, which happens a lot, because 'cause I'll have, like, a long form, and so I'll have, like, this book I'm doing is ten hours, this book I'm doing is 2 hours. I will do them at separate times of the day. So the
okay.
big, long one I'll do during my twins' nap, and then if I have a shorter one, I wait until, like, Tuesday night, and then I'll do it there. So I'm in a completely different phase of the day, and I'm able to say, "That book belongs to nighttime. This book belongs to daytime." And usually while I'm, like, setting up my booth, putting things together, that's when I'll start to think about, "Okay, what was the last thing that happened in the book?" Where my English major brain comes into, "What was the literary analysis of the last chapter?" Um and kind of get myself back into that space. If it's something like editing where I'm like, "Oh crap, I can't remember if that was the correct voice for this character," I do save voice files of
Mm,
every single one of my characters. Narrator voice is easier to find because it's just in all of the things. But if there is more than 10 characters I can keep in my brain. More than 10 characters, I make a voice file just in case.
right. Okay, nice. So now let's actually go back in time a little bit. Let's actually go back to the first project you were a part of, Amber. So you're now beginning this project. This is the first
Mhm.
project you're beginning as a narrator in the industry. Now, when you began getting your booth set up and everything, what were the goals you had for yourself as the narrator and voice artist, as well as the promise you're making, not just to yourself, but also the author, that you're working with, possibly other narrators that may be being what's the word I'm thinking of? I'm just blanking. That are also tagged with this project, but also the readers too, the prospective readers who will be reading this book or listening to this book when it comes out.
With my first project, I think the only promise I was making myself and them was that I was going to get it done and that I wasn't going to make them go to sleep. I was so nervous. And I think at the beginning of that project, I didn't realize, like, it wasn't that I didn't realize how much performance went into it. It wasn't that I didn't realize how excited I was going to get into it. But there was parts of it that I didn't realize I was doing subconsciously, of, like, getting into characters, getting really excited about characters, getting really emotionally invested in what was going on with a character. And so for me, like, in my brain, I was very much just being like, "I promise you won't fall asleep. And I am going to do my best to make sure this is clear." And to my author, um I read this story, and Bill does great work with characters. He really makes you care about characters, and we won't talk about what he then does with them, but he knows what he did. Um, but, you know, for me as a narrator, a lot of my goal as I was working through that project very much became this obsessive need to be able to have the author, to be able to have the reader, and, like, and I've told you this before, that, like, my first reader is my author, my first listener is my author.
Right.
And so I was obsessed with this idea of having Bill hear what his words do.
Mm.
Him feel it, because I know it's like, and you must understand this as an author, that, like, maybe the first or second time that you write a really cool line, you're like, "Yeah, that was really cool." But then after, hours of editing or years of it being out on the shelves, it's kind of like, well, all right.
Yes.
Or was it as good, right? That imposter syndrome starts to hit you.
Hmm.
But something I have seen time and time again with my authors is that when I pour all of the things that I love about their writing into my performance, they hear the impact of what is
Right.
going on. And that's what I want for the listeners too. If my author is going to be happy, I think my listeners end up happy too, because they are getting that experience as best transcribed from one medium to another, when I can make the author understand, this is how important this line was. This is how impactful. This is how this line makes somebody feel. And I can make them feel their own words back at them.
Mm.
Then we know that we're on track to have the audience feel the way that the author intended them to feel or wants them to feel. So that kind of became my goal by the end of it, is after every chapter that Bill checks on mine, will I make him have an "oh gosh" moment? Whether that's, "I didn't
Awesome.
realize that was that funny," or "That's exactly how I heard that," or "I've never thought of it that way, but that's perfect." Like, that kind of moment I wanted for every single chapter.
Awesome. Okay, Amber. And sort of as a double whammy fun question, which I want to ask you, out of all of your projects that you've worked on, what has been your favorite line to record and also the most challenging scene to record? This can either
Mm.
be you as a character or the expository narration that you did as the main narrator.
So both of my favorites come from the memoir, Stargazing in Solitude by Suzanne Samples. I could not tell you the line off the top of my head, but she has a beautiful line where, so the memoir is about a young woman. She was, I believe, 32 at the beginning of this second memoir that she had written, and she had been diagnosed with grade 4 brain cancer,
Ooh.
uh, glioblastoma multiforme, which was a fun word to figure out how to pronounce. And so she had written an initial memoir before this one, because she had gone from being absolutely healthy, playing roller derby. She was a writing teacher. She was looking to write a bunch of stories, and then had a seizure in a coffee shop one day. And they found out that she had this brain cancer, and she had been given only like 18 months to live, at the writing of the first memoir. She ended up surviving, I believe, 5 or 6 years past that. She has unfortunately passed. I did do this posthumously, which was a huge honor. But she has a line in the second book where she's kind of grappling with this. Okay, I was getting prepared. I was already grappling with all these questions of what it means to be sick, what it means to be terminally ill at this young age. Um, and now I'm still here. And I still want to write. I'm still a writer. I'm still an author. But what does writing mean when you don't know how much longer you have? And so she has a beautiful passage where she explains what glioblastoma multiforme is, using black holes and
Oh.
stars and constellations. And it is, I remember the first time I read it in prep, I just had to like put it down for a second and be like, that it feels weird for that to be as beautiful as it is because she's talking about her brain destroying itself.
Mm.
And it was just one of those beautiful, like you're holding two things in your hand at the same time, something gorgeous and something tragic. Um, and that was a huge thing for me to narrate. Um, in that novel though, the hardest scene to narrate is in one of the final parts of the book. She's talked throughout the book about her cat companion.
Mm.
She has some dogs and she has some cats, and one of her cats is just like very spunky, hates everyone but her kind of character. And as she's dying, so is this cat. And the cat actually passes away before her.
Oh.
And uh and not just that, Suzanne was brilliant. I regret that I didn't get to meet her, because we would have had so much fun.
Mm.
But she has a beautiful scene where she's talking about losing her cat, losing like this soul buddy of hers who's seen her through so much. She's talked through a lot of the memoir about losing her friends, because it is a sad reality that when you are chronically ill or terminally ill, you lose a lot of friends. I
Yes.
related to that hard as being someone who is chronically ill. How many people stop caring after, the first 3 months of diagnosis and you're still in pain. Um, and so she's talked a lot about that loneliness throughout this, and so the constant companionship and love that she has from this cat, and, her dealing with those moments of grief. And then she relates that to the understanding that she has of her mother as she's watching her. And that being the moment she understands what it must be like for her mother.
Mm.
And it is like, it's not belabored, it is just a beautiful moment where she calls her mom, and her mom is like, "I know." And you're just like, "Holy crap." That one, like, when I was going through editing, there was a lot of sniffling noises, there was a lot of, like, I'll do a line, and then you just hear for the next 5 minutes me going, breathing through it. Though there were some really, really hard moments in that one of it needing to be important for
Mhm.
those emotions to be real and grounded because it is from her perspective. It is from the perspective of her pain.
Right.
And so it's not a space where you can just collect yourself and go like that had to be in there. And so every chapter is probably like an extra 20 minutes of me just trying to keep my shit together. And I'm very proud of that. And again, very honored to have been able to do that story. And it was probably the first story that has really changed my life as a person. And I'm obsessed with it.
Holy cow, Amber. That is powerful. And I imagine once, after finishing all the narration and listening
Mhm.
to the files, as you said, definitely it will be a very powerful, reflective moment. I mean, hearing the words again. It's one thing to, say the words, but then listening to them, it's a whole different feeling. And I'm curious for friends and family as well as fans of the project you've been a part of, what has been their reaction like?
So for like those scenes in particular, I had a friend of mine who does not listen to memoir, does not like sad things, actively told me he wasn't going to want to read this memoir because he was not looking forward to hearing me say some of the things that Suzanne says in her book. But I hooked him in. I hooked him in with the fact that she is sassy and she is very foul-mouthed. I say the word fuck at least 200 times in that project. I curse more than in that than in any other project, and it's very funny. So, the more I talked about it, the more he was like, "All right, fine." Um, and I would get messages from my favorite chapters, and he would like the comments he was making. I was like, "Oh, I know exactly where you're at." And he was like, "This is awful. Why are you making me listen to this?" Because it was making him feel things.
Mm,
And for me, it was really important to hear him and other reviewers who have reviewed that particular audiobook to say things like, you could really tell that you were in her shoes. You
mm,
could really tell that this was extremely moving, and I was moved because you were moved. Um, so that was really important. With other projects, it's been a lot more lighthearted, with their reactions of I love I love when my husband's listening to one of them, and I know he's listening to one of them, and he just like giggles. And I'm like, "Oh, I hit a funny part. Great." 'Cause I did not expect my, like, humor to be on track for that part, but I really appreciate when I get the reviews of, like, this added something, or, the sci-fi noir that
right.
just hit number 1 today of the, like, it feels
Oh,
like you're in a poke room.
congratulations.
Yeah, me and Samina woke up to that this morning and, have been hyperventilating ever since. So it hit number 1 in sci-fi crime and mystery, number 1 in sci-fi dystopian, number 43 in Audible Originals, number 4 in dystopian sci-fi. I got my first orange banner. That was yeah, pretty crazy, but I'm assuming I will get more uh feedback from having so many ears on it, and I'm both looking forward to and absolutely terrified of that, so
Awesome. And speaking of feedback, it's also important to talk about the other side of feedback, which, as an author, the one thing that we always want is, constructive feedback. But sometimes
Mhm.
we ourselves get, bad reviews or, negativity and criticism. So for you, Amber, I don't know if you've ever received any in your professional career as a narrator, but how would you handle, negative critiques or harsh responses to your performances in the books you've been a part of?
I mean, no one could be harsher than my own husband. He is an audio person, so when, everyone else is like, "I didn't hear any mistakes," he's like, "Alright, there was mistakes here, and here, and here, and
Mhm.
this was fuzzy, and this is so, no one can be as mean to me as my husband is. I love him very much. But in all seriousness, like, I have not yet gotten a bad review, but I'm a new narrator. I expect I will, and that's because people have different opinions. Like, I have seen the best narrators in the world, the best actors and actresses in the world, have somebody that hates them, has
Mhm.
several people who can't stand them. I have actors that I know that everybody loves that I can't stand. Benedict Cumberbatch, can't stand him. I know people love him. I will not watch a single thing that has him in it. It's like, and that's just a personal taste thing. So just like I would hope that Benedict Cumberbatch would never take that personally. Um, for me, there is a large space of people have their tastes, their opinions. My
Mhm.
voice is unique. I have been very well aware of that from a young age. I have a lower register feminine voice. I naturally have a ton of vocal fry in my voice. Um, that sometimes I can't really get rid of, so it kind of
Right.
hides in a lot of my lines, which works for me when people hire me for that.
Right.
Um, but I can see that being something that people are like, "I cannot stand the sound of that." Um, like, there's some grace for that, but when people do have constructive feedback, um, my husband with my first one was like, "I don't think this was the actual emotion of this line." Um, we workshopped that. Okay, great. Like, I'm new, I want to learn. Like, that's
Mhm.
that's kind of my attitude. that is not to say that I don't curl up into a little hate ball for about 20 minutes when I read those and obsess about it for like 3 days afterwards. So that's not to say I handle it with complete grace. But being someone who has been in the creative field for a very long time in various different
Mm,
ways, um, I have learned how to manage rejection, in a
right.
way that does not paralyze me.
Absolutely. And I think this falls through with the next set of questions, which is, of course, being authors and editors and creatives in general in the digital age post
Ugh.
COVID, because social media, and there's a whole debate on this you can make a whole episode on this argument of social media in the creative world, but specifically for authors, editors, and narrators using social media as a platform to grow their
Mhm,
brand, it is a double-edged sword because on one side, we're able to connect with our fans, we're able to connect with
mhm,
like-minded people, network, which is huge. And unfortunately, the other side, we do leave ourselves exposed to a lot of negativity, criticism, trolls, spam, hate speech, and that can be very detrimental to a person's mental health and overall well-being. And of course, imposter syndrome is always going to be present. And I remember this was from a different narrator interview that I actually saw on YouTube, but I think it is a very interesting point that this person was making. I forgot their name, but they were saying the industry for narrators has changed
mhm,
over time because, just like for authors, independent publishing was seen as, a lesser form of publishing, but now it's huge. The market has skyrocketed.
mhm,
For narrators, it's also changed because for audiobooks of the past, you had theater actors, Broadway actors, actors from TV and television narrating books. And now you have, the common man who is able to uh, grow their own following as a narrator. And that's not to be seen as, negative, viewers and listeners, but I'm saying that there is a trend, there's a
mhm.
shift. But I've also known that that can also be seen as a way to, unfortunately, to build up unnecessary anxiety. It's like, I don't know if I should be doing this. People have been doing this for years now. They have a wide range of voice talent, and that could, again, lead to imposter syndrome. So for you, Amber, when you began this journey of yours, did you ever have those moments of heightened anxiety or imposter syndrome? And
Mhm.
if so, or if not, what has continued to discipline you to continue being the best narrator you can be and give out the best performances you can give out?
So when I first started, I actually didn't think about social media at all. Bill was the one who was who was like, "Hey, do you have an Instagram?" And I was like, "Oh shit, I probably gonna have to market this book somehow, right?" Which hyping up my author's books, I'm really good at. So like that, I think takes a little bit of the anxiety out for me because it's not. It is my performance, but it is an author's words. So like that does help me a little bit. But when I first got into the, social media, like I'm a fairly private person.
Mm,
What I do give out to the world is the things that I am comfortable with. They are the things
right,
that um I am already pretty solid in or that I think is important to share. I do not share a whole lot of other things. On the top
right.
of the fact that I am a mother of 3 children. And so I do not want their lives impacted by social media, and I've seen that happen, over
Mhm,
and over again, and, in performance spaces. So I had to be really clear with my intention of like, what was I gonna do with social media? What was going to be the point of the social media? I keep my personals and my so like even with my discords, I have a separate personal discord and a separate work discord. I have separate emails. I have separate Instagram accounts, personal account. I do not keep those things mixed. I do
right.
use my, actual name for most of my narrations. I have a pseudonym for like romance stuff because people already have gotten a little icky in comments, but people have been really good at like when I brought up concerns about like, "Hey, this person has approached me in a way that is not appropriate." The group that it happened in, they immediately like banhammered that person. So I felt really safe in the group that it happened in.
Right.
So like there is some awareness and protection and support there. But going into it, I had to be very, very clear of like, what kind of content am I going to post? How often am
Right.
I going to post? How can I keep that boundary so that like I don't start building unhealthy parasocial relationships
Right.
versus like healthy professional relationships with people? And that was a big thing. I remember being terrified when I reached out to my first narrator.
Mm-hmm.
The first narrator that I was like, I really like your vibe. I really like what you're doing. I think I was just commenting on, I can't remember what video I was commenting on. It was Heather Kaling. And I remember like being so amazed by like the work she was doing with accents and dialects, and she looked really cool and really fun. And I remember that gave me so much anxiety of like, what are they going to think of me?
Right.
Do they not think I take it seriously enough, or do I not have the right equipment, or do not? And the narrator community is fantastic. So I was expecting kind of, judgment, or like even just like standoffishness, not necessarily that we're all gonna like mean girl me or anything,
Right.
but that
Right.
they would hold me at arm's length. And that has not been my experience. I think we all know what it's like to be, stuck in a padded room all day,
Mm-hmm.
and want to help each other. And kind of like you were saying with the changing um kind of landscape of
Right.
narration, it seems to be in our best interest to work together, to collaborate, to realize that like other narrators are not my competition, they are my coworkers.
Yes.
And that like there's a lot of things that like, let's say Daphne can do that I can't, that Mariana can do that I can't, that
Yes.
DK can do that I can't. And it's not because anyone's trying harder, or I mean, sometimes it is. Sometimes they are just straight up more talented than I am. I almost said that and was like, that is a straight up lie. Some of them are far more talented than I am. But sometimes that's just they are a good fit for that role, for
Right.
that genre, for that author's vision. Like that's and kind of having that come off and us all be really happy for each other. I sent a message today to a narrator that I respect, who I had auditioned for the title she just finished. And the message wasn't like backhanded or mean. It was me being like, "Hey, I'm so excited that someone that like I respect and like got this project that I thought was really cool, and that just made me really happy to see today." And like being very genuinely supportive of one another. We give each other casting links,
Mm-hmm.
because we want to build each other up. We want this to be a strong industry, because I think that solidarity is important in this like changing landscape of not just, okay, now there's this influx of indie narrators, but there's that kind of corporate push of, but what about AI narration? Um,
Mm-hmm.
and that solidarity, I think, I wasn't here 10 years ago, so like it's not something that I'm saying wasn't there 10 years ago. I wouldn't know, but I absolutely know that that is motivating a lot of us to be a lot more come out of our shells and talk to other narrators more than maybe we would have, even if it's just because we're introverts.
Yes.
Um, to be able to protect each other, to be able to get each other the projects that we want, and also sometimes for our authors. I've seen a lot of casting calls of like wanting authentic casting, but
Mm-hmm.
the author doesn't know anybody who would be authentic to the character they're looking for. They don't know anyone in the industry who does that. But I know someone who does know, and so we build these kinds of relationships with our authors and with the narrators, and then they all become friends, and it's not just a strong network then of narrators, but then we are also creating that strong network with indie authors. And I'm hoping like all branches, then authors, as they're commissioning character art and they're commissioning
Yes.
cover arts, they're making really strong relationships with artists, and so we're making this big like strong net of indie artists. um and to me, I think that's kind of our only chance
Mm-hmm.
at kind of beating back that flow. And I think we have a damn good chance at that
Yes.
with the talent I have seen. I think we have a damn good chance.
Absolutely, Amber. And you touched on a lot of great things, which I do want to highlight before we get to the business side. And one of them, of course, is, the rise of AI. And this has led to, this debate of, are we in like a dark age because of AI? Or are we in like a golden age because there's a lot of new voices, be it artists, editors, or narrators? And a lot of people I've had on the show have said, it's kind of like in the middle, where yes, there is a golden age feeling because there are new voices in the industry making waves and shaking the field, which is, really good. On the other side, we also have to acknowledge that AI has made things, and I actually remember this from one guest I had on the show, that AI has made the industry more mass produced in terms of content, which is very true. In writing, in narration, in editing, it mass produces the services of people who have spent most, if not a majority of their lives, honing and perfecting. So, Amber, I would like to hear your thoughts on this debate. And do you agree that we are kind of in this weird limbo that, yes, it is a golden age, but also it's a pseudo dark age?
I think we're in the growing pains. I wouldn't even say we're in a limbo, like we're not in like a liminal space where we're waiting. I've
Okay.
been very hopeful in that we're not just like hanging out in the middle. There are some amazing uses for assistive AI. There
Yes.
are amazing uses for this technology. And I think we're kind of just in that, like when we looked at the dark ages of the internet, like the dark
Yes.
back when we were wee children, the weird shit that happened with the internet, and sometimes the scary shit that happened with the internet when it was at its beginning. We're looking at like NFTs. We're looking at like people sometimes like to think of things as linear, as like we step and then we step and then we step.
Right.
Um, and I think we're in this weird growing space where at the same time we are having this discussion of like, what is AI for? Art?
Right.
No. Taking over dangerous processes that could be self-automated to better create more luxury time for humans, to reduce the amount of time that people need to work, to create a more equitable society and more accessible society. Interesting. Cool. But I think because everybody wants a little piece of that pie, we're seeing it encroaching into spaces where it's not needed, it's not wanted,
Right.
by either the creatives or the audience, because the audience is burning out on that. You can see that from the reviews. You can see that from how many people are leaving certain social media places. They just don't spend as much time on certain things as they used to because a lot of it's slop.
Yes.
Um, so you're seeing that like weird growth, and what I'm seeing from like what we're seeing with lawsuits, what we're seeing with, all of these businesses who laid off a bunch of people and now are desperately trying to hire people back, is we are seeing them figuring out what this is for.
Hmm.
And it's a gross and it's a terrible growing period, but I think it's a growing period, and I think there's a decent amount of pushback and conversation that is happening, that in the middle of it seems bad. But if we keep having the conversations, I'm not saying the conversation's done, but if we keep pushing these conversations, I think we can help mold that and grow that in a way that is beneficial for society, does not replace creatives. And at the
Yes.
same time, we are having this golden age of accessibility for talent. And I think that like what we're seeing in this growing period is that fear that we're taking away the accessibility so that like this can be accessed only by the rich, and there's no place now for the skilled to climb. um we are still now having this accessibility of people who otherwise would have been kind of like stonewalled in the industry,
Hmm.
no leg into the industry, now do and can make a name for themselves. um Whether that's like the narrator and the authors together, because like I've seen a lot of that work together. um and I think the conversations that are being had and the trajectory that that's going, that we are in that growing pains towards a golden age, because I am seeing this influx of, narrators standing up for each other, narrators standing
Hmm.
up for like authentic casting, narrators standing up for not like just each other of like equal opportunities, but also equal pay between male and female narrators, equal treatment between male and female narrators. kind of this new expectations of respect in the industry that is really cool. And like, I'm obviously benefiting from it
Mhm.
because of the amazing amount of people that I've met in this industry that are fantastic and diverse
Yeah.
and special and so unique, and those perspectives are so important for the art. Um, so I would say we're moving through it. We are not in the limbo. We are not there yet, but we are moving towards that way. And if we keep having the conversations, if we keep insisting on human performances, human writing, human art, if we keep insisting like, hey, this is what I would like AI to do. This is what I would like AI to provide us. Um, and we keep sticking together kind of like in that network
Mhm.
of artists, and having that space of, if I wouldn't want someone to take my job, like if I as a narrator don't want to take that job, then I'm not going to knowingly narrate AI written work. Or
Mhm.
if I'm a writer that I don't want AI to take my writing, I wouldn't have an AI narrate my work or have an AI cover, because if I wouldn't want someone to take my creativity, I'm not like that kind of solidarity. Um, and I'm seeing it happen, and I am hopeful that we will continue to go this way instead of like veering a weird left.
Yes. And just one last thing to touch on that. I remember I had a guest on my show who probably gave the best description of AI writing in the publishing industry, which was asking AI to give you a story is like asking an alcoholic seventh grader to write a book.
Oh man, I have a whole TED talk about about the weird uses of AI and like what you can expect an algorithm to do and not.
Mhm.
I don't have to say anything, just go watch Mrs. Davis. That's all. It's a
Yes, but
beautiful show about that concept.
you're absolutely right, Amber. And that, perfectly leads into, the business side of being
Mhm.
narrator. So, and I think I gave a lot of great details on this. So, as a little sort of like a little fun question for you, Amber, looking back, what has been the most surprising thing that you've learned about being a narrator? And also, is there one aspect of your journey you would change?
If I could change anything, I would have bought a XLR mic first. And not a USB mic, which I don't blame myself for getting the USB mic first. I got it because I didn't know if I was gonna like it, and so I was not sure I wanted to make the full investment. So I might have done a little more research, a little more practice, a little more like getting a feel for the. I've seen people like literally practice for months before they audition.
Right.
That probably would have been helpful for me to make the actual good, like, financial decision, because now I'm like, "Oh, man, now I really need an XLR mic." Um, but I'm almost there. We're getting ready for an upgrade. Um, the most surprising part of the industry, hmm. Like, oh, it's been a pretty big learning curve. I
Mhm.
remember I was surprised to hell that I couldn't just, like, plug in, talk to mic, and then send them my voice. That's the first 2 weeks of trying to figure out how to get noise floor to work. I was in tears. Just like, "Wait a second." So I think that was probably, like, if I'm looking back, the most surprising thing is how technical,
Mhm.
narration is, because the performance part, as a stage performer, I'm used to the technical part being with my body, being
Right.
with how I breathe, being with how I present myself, which is still coming into play with narration. Um, but especially when you're at the stage of your career where you're doing most of your own editing, when you're doing most of your own mastering and stuff like that, um, how much of that time is spent being technical and learning technical stuff, that surprised me. I find it fun, so it was not a bad surprising, but like I guess those first 2 weeks were really bad.
Right. Absolutely, absolutely. And this goes back to something that you've also talked about earlier, which is networking and collaboration, and also having
Mhm.
a good relationship with the authors that you're working with. And this leads to a very fun question and rather a discussion, which is understanding the audience. And why I bring this up is that as authors, we are the target audience first and foremost for our books, and when we go about publishing it, we then have to figure it out. But I also feel when we have narrators involved, authors don't realize it, but narrators are, in a way, a perfect example of the readership and realizing, are these people going to resonate with the book? So, Amber, I'm curious, have there ever been any discussions with any of the authors that you've worked with where you've had to collaborate and sort of like have those moments of maybe not re-edit, so to speak, but talking with the author saying, are you sure that this book is for YA? Because some of the dialogue is more new adult or adult fiction. And add on to that, how important is it for kind of like both parties to really understand the target audience that the author is marketing for and also the narrator is narrating for?
I haven't had to change anyone's like genre. I have had conversations with my authors about like, is that how you want to market this? In terms of like tropes or like what is really
Yeah.
fascinating. Sometimes what the author finds super fascinating about their story is not it's not that the reader is not going to find that part fascinating. Like they often do. But it's not going to be what's going to make them pick it up off the shelf without knowing it from Adam. And so those have been conversations I've had of like, actually, what was the most compelling and what made this unique, or something that would be a comp title, is it this factor instead, or this thing. For every single one of my books, I make a trope map. And
Mm,
every single time my authors are like, oh, like I didn't realize that was something, like I wouldn't have called it that trope. And I'm like, but it fits. And that's important because that is like, as tired as some people might find trope maps, it does help people build expectations and kind of to your
yes.
point of like, does it fit that genre? It is important for you to put your book in the right genre because when you put something in a genre, when you put a trope map there, people are expecting things. And if you give a reader like, ooh, I have romance, but there's no happily ever after. I know that's controversial. I don't care if it doesn't have a happily ever after. It is not romance TM. It has a romance subplot. But
Mm.
English major, I get real mad about this. Oh man, my TED Talks about what is or is not high fantasy is pretty angry. But when you're trying to like game the system of like, but it's kind of don't do that. Because you're going to piss off your reader who came in with a specific set of expectations, and you are more likely to get a bad review about that, or to get readers who aren't going to be excited, or they're going to read it and forget about it, than if you give them correct expectations, and let them go from there.
Mm.
So that is always my thing with authors is give them the right expectations. Like there are readers who want to read your books. I
Yeah.
promise you. Humans are weird little creatures. I don't care what you wrote. Someone wants to read it, but you need to tell them what's in there, not tell them what you think they want is what you think is trending, or what like social media is. They, if they are your readers, they want to read your stuff. Find the right genre. Do some studies into what your genre like expectations are. If it is a romance subplot in a drama or a literary fiction, put that there's a romance subplot. That's what people want to know.
Yes. Absolutely. And I do have another question, but I'm going to change this one a bit, which is, finding your voice. And typically that is about, finding your voice as, narrator, balancing, your
Mm.
individuality, but also understanding the genre. But I'm going to change a little bit in terms of
Ooh.
finding your voice in terms of saying no. Because I've talked with a lot of narrators
Ooh.
on the show about, the power of saying no, as well as some editors as well. And why I bring this up, viewers and listeners, is that, the power of no is a very powerful weapon, especially for editors and narrators. When we as authors are writing stories, we should write the stories that we want to write about. But I cannot stress this enough. For us as authors, we have to be mindful that if we make the decision to have narrators be on board, we have to tell them the full story of the book. We have to give them trigger warnings. We have to let them know
Yeah.
what's in it. And there are going to be some instances where they will say no, and we as authors have to respect that. So for you, Amber, how would you like to add more to this discussion that as narrators and voice
Mhm.
over artists in the publishing industry, you do have that power to say no to an author, regardless of who it is, like someone who's in the industry for 20
Yeah.
something years and has a slew of books, but you yourself reading it don't feel comfortable wanting to narrate or agree with what's in the story, regardless of it's like, fiction or nonfiction.
Mhm. So for me, it's kind of the like what is the goal? Like when you have a narrator, what is your goal? Is your goal to have someone sound a certain way, or is your goal to share the story you wrote? Regardless of what trigger warnings that I will or will not do, and I have some pretty hard no's, and I have said no to people because I have some pretty hard no's. That one was specifically under my pseudonym. Someone had a thing in there that was like a twin on twin. I have twins. I won't do that. I will not read that. That to me
Mhm.
is not okay. But there are going to be people out there who do want to read that, or violence, or historical stuff, or whether it's because it's cathartic, or whether it's because it doesn't bother them as much, or because some of those stories can be really powerful. Like just
Yes,
because someone has a hard no about something you've written about does not mean you wrote a bad story. It does
correct.
not mean that it's not an important story. Um, but when you're picking a narrator, even if you think the person's voice is perfect, you don't want someone who's going to be uncomfortable reading it. Trust
Yes.
me, your listeners will know. So
Mm.
the importance of me saying no is not just to protect my feelings and to protect my mental health. It does do that. Because having to put myself in a space, because we're not just like reading it. It's easy to read those books on paper. There's books that I will read personally. I will not perform them because it's
Mm.
very different to read the story and just kind of passively have that, and then to have to, like, depending on the perspective, either fully embody that character if it's first person, or embody them even for a little bit of the time when you're just saying some of their lines. That can be extremely traumatizing.
Yes.
So that is a very different, like, it could be easy for me to read it in my head, but I can't perform that. That is really triggering and really bad, and that's gonna put me in a bad space. But for you as the author, if this is a story that you believe in, because even if it's just because it's entertaining, like I'm not even saying it has to have like big important reasons to have all the trigger warnings. I don't care why you have them.
Mhm.
If you want to entertain, if you want to educate, if you want to make people feel things, you're not going to get that from someone who's uncomfortable with that material. So I'm saying no for me, but I'm also saying no for the author and out of respect for their work. Not because I'm judging them, not because I think that their stuff should never be narrated, but because if I narrate it, it's going to suck.
Right.
Even if 90% of the book is fine, it's going to suck.
Yes, absolutely. And this actually pairs perfectly with the next question, which is networking and collaboration, which I think you mentioned very
Mhm.
early on, which I think that is huge for everyone who
Mhm.
is an indie authors, indie editors, indie narrators. We all build our own street teams to help us,
Yeah.
promote ourselves. And it's a wonderful thing. And I can't stress this enough, viewers and listeners. Networking is vital. I sort of joined the party very late when I was promoting my third book, Michael, Last Angel of Earth, and now going into my fourth book, Decimus, the Wolf of Rome. I now have a better idea of the people I want to work with, Amber, DK, Daphne, Mariana, Luke, and many more narrators, as well as fellow editors, as well as other authors I want to collab in the future. It's very important to grow your network, but also
Mhm.
grow with people that you feel that you can trust, that you know that if you wanted to have them be an arc reader for you, you're going to get good feedback,
Mhm.
harsh criticism or not, or be an honest beta reader. They may hurt your feelings, but you're going to get a really good answer. So for you, Amber, how important is it, in your opinion, to really grow your networking circle as an indie. And I know you've name dropped Bill numerous times throughout the interview. I've had him on the show.
He's a
Great guy, as well
favorite.
as Into the Maze, as well as Daphne, DK, and many others. But I'm wondering, are there any other people that you would like to give a personal shout out to who have helped you on your journey as a narrator?
Carmen. Carmen Chantel is someone I look up to a lot, someone I respect, someone who I don't think necessarily like set out to shepherd a bunch of baby narrators, but ended up doing it anyways because she's good at it. And is just a really good person at providing like not necessarily like personal feedback. It's not like I go to her and I'm like, give me all of the thing, but she provides space. And she provides space for people to Phil Gilbert is also a really good narrator for that, of narrators who have been there a little bit longer than I have, or a lot longer than I have, and are good at creating space for other narrators to learn, to talk to each other. Like, it doesn't even have to be advice directly from them, but they facilitate spaces and conversations for us to connect to each other, to talk to one another, to sometimes just commiserate with each other, so that, like, if they don't have the answers, we can connect to someone who does, and they're kind of committed to making safe, respectful spaces for
Yeah.
that, which has been a huge lifeline through stress, through having questions, through just like being able to watch other narrators also struggle with the same things, or struggle with things I haven't struggled with yet, but I will. And like being able to see them go through that has been a really big thing. I know Heather and Annette Swift have been my besties in terms of like always being there, always there to talk to me about, things personal and professional, but also being fantastic people to watch their careers grow. We love to challenge each other. We love to cheer each other on. Um, and all of my authors, not just Bill, all of my authors have been very, very effective. So, Samina Lungu, Anna Lynn Hammer, Jules Peacock, Richard Dansky. Richard Dansky knows my name. It's crazy. Vivian Van Dam, even my authors of my children's books, Sunbeam Books and the Westbrooks, have been fantastic. And Valora Venn, who is currently running the GoFundMe to bring a new audiobook next year. Just fantastic, fantastic people.
Awesome, Amber. Awesome. And we've now arrived at the final question of this incredible narrator interview. Now, this one's actually more of a scenario, hypothetical,
Ooh.
not to say situation, but hypothetical little RP. So let's say that you are at a event, a book con, so to speak,
Hell
and
yeah.
you are giving a seminar, a workshop to aspiring narrators in the industry. There are numerous topics to discuss, growing your marketing team, or how to do book tours with the authors, or finding your voice. In the wide pool of numerous topics to discuss with these aspiring narrators, what is the one piece that you would like to share to these narrators that would also be a good piece of wisdom to instill upon them as they embark on this new journey?
Time management. Mostly because that is, especially in any creative field, right? You can get really excited and you can overextend yourself. And I do see this with both narrators who are new and narrators who are old, who are like, I'm going to grab all the projects I can and are super stressed out. Some people work really well under pressure. And some people have different situations. I've talked to narrators who are also parents of littles, who are co-parenting, who are chronically ill, like myself. And so like having that conversation is important to have upfront. when you are starting narrating, and to consistently have with yourself, to check in with yourself about like, what time do I have to give for narration,
Mm.
separate from my commitments to my family, separate from my commitments to my partner, separate from my commitments to my friends, like sitting down and having a very serious conversation with yourself of how many hours do you have? How many hours can you commit, rather than trying to fit things all in together? And because for me, and I know I've seen this for a lot of other people, if you don't schedule the rest, if you don't schedule the family time, if you don't schedule even just that you need to have time for it, like you don't have to have it all on a Google Calendar.
Mhm.
That's how I work, but that's not how everybody works. Most people are more spontaneous than I am. But if you at least don't have like a general schedule of 2 hours in the day is for narration work, 1 hour in the day is for sitting with my kid at the dinner table. 1 hour of the day is for checking in with my spouse. 1 hour, if I'm planning out a project, it takes me 2 weeks to do a project if I'm on top of it. I need to, plan in a day, 2 days for if my kid gets sick, if I get sick, if we have the dryer break in our house so that I'm not stressed out. I personally do a week because I always have moments where my migraines flare or whatever. So like making sure that you are creating good boundaries and creating realistic expectations for yourself so that when you say yes to a project, when you say yes to an author, you can say yes with your whole chest.
Yes.
And you can continue to say yes with your whole chest to your kids, to your spouse, because you don't want this to be a space when we talk about burnout in
Mm.
any creative space. Some of the things that are the highest contributors to burnout is not having time for self-care, not having time for feeding the relationships that then feed you back, and building resentments and sudden crises. So if we're not planning for that in our planning for projects, how many projects can I take on? What kind of projects can I take on? Um, Even putting that into our time planning of, how many royalty share projects can I take versus do I need to take all paid for finish hour? Does it have to be royalty share plus? At what point can I not take a royalty share versus a royalty share plus? Like those kinds of decisions, that's all time management.
Absolutely. And to add to that, before we officially end, viewers and listeners, is that just like authors and editors, this is not a get rich quick scheme, viewers and listeners. Would we all
Nope.
like it to be? Absolutely, but that's not the case. And also, there are two paths for creatives: to be something and to be known as something, which are two very different things, which again go back to what Amber said as time management. Because for one, it's dedicated to the craft, the other is dedicated to the business side, and they lead to the same
Mhm.
ending, which is good. But the objective, the time management, they have to be realistic, because at the
Mhm.
end of the day, there is no guarantee in this industry for like the authors, for editors, and for narrators, and that is okay. It may be the 15th project that really gets your
Mhm.
names out there. And when that happens, you can tell your viewers, your fans, your followers who have been with you since day one, and say, if you enjoyed this book that's been the New York Times bestseller for about 6 weeks in a row, see my journey and how I got to this point. Because at the end of the day, I remember this very true, and I think this is true for narrators, is that writing is not indulgent, it is an obligation. I think that is very true
Mhm.
for narrators, because writers create the word, but narrators share the word, and that's shared over generations. And with that, viewers and listeners, we conclude this amazing narrator interview here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. I want to give a huge thank you to Amber for coming back on the show, and we wish her the very best going forward for the rest of 2025 into 2026. And make sure to check out her short where she narrates a chapter from The Gathering as Cynbel, which if you message her and ask her about that, that is probably one of her many favorite characters, new favorite characters to voice. So be on the lookout for more details on that. Now, Amber, again, thank you so much for coming on the show. Where can people find you on social media if they want to reach out? And in addition to the projects that you mentioned early in the interview, are there any others that we can expect from you possibly in 2026?
So if you're looking for me on social media, I am on almost all social media at amber.does.audio. That's always going to be my handle. Look for the blue hair and the shaved head. I am actually working on a bunch of projects up until 2026. So we'll be doing the second of the Dragoon Heralds. So Virtuoso just came out, so I'll be the second of that series. It is a 9-book planned series. I will also be doing the second of the Crestfallen Saga. So the book that I just am about to release, The Paradox of Survival, we will be releasing the audiobook for the second book, The Whispers of the Storm, that time of the year. In the middle of April to the end of the year, we'll be working on Star Reign, The Legacy of the Primordials, which is the magical girls versus mechs, kind of beautiful, diverse story. So we'll be working on that. And then we're looking at doing my first duet towards the end of 2026. So we've got a lot going down the pipeline, and I'm looking forward to that. And I'm sure by the end of that time next year, we'll have even more. So I am very blessed with all the authors who have found me.
Awesome. I will link all that down below in the description of this video. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for another amazing late night interview here on the channel. Again, a huge thank you to my friend Amber for coming back on the show. And hopefully this will not be the last time we see her. Hopefully we can have her back for a follow-up interview and possibly a panel of narrators, which may or may not be in the works, which may or may not include some familiar faces like Daphne Winters, Damian Knight, Mariana, Amber, Luke, and possibly some new faces like Brittany, Heather, Lauren, and of course, the queen herself, Sophia Dujardin. So you may have to just stay up to date with all of our social media to find out more. But until then, viewers and listeners, thank you so much. And as always, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe down below. And until next time, this is the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill signing out. Wish you all a wonderful evening or morning wherever you are in the world. And we'll see you all in the next episode.